Welcome back. This is Kivumbi 2017, your most qualified coverage of this year's general election. 7 days to election day, and we are speaking about this issue. We are, of course, putting the spotlight on the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission and a lot of issues ongoing around that Chebukati-led commission. The same issues are the ones that Kenyans are discussing online on social media. Let's now cross over to our Joy Doreen Bira, who has been keeping an eye on those conversations for us. Joy Doreen.
Thanks a lot, Ben. And that is a great conversation you're having there as well. And there's quite some feedback in regard to the various conversations you're having. We have Sam Gishuru, who is saying, I didn't know much about Chris Msando. Before this weekend, he represents many other Kenyans doing risky jobs that keep us safe. That is under the hashtag rest in peace, or RIP Msando. And we also have one here coming in from Nick Wamalwa. This is actually in regard to fake news and headlines. I think we've seen that most of today with the KDF official. And he says, screaming headlines that give you half-truth only for you to click and find hogwash. That's how you know how fake news is. And we also have CB Cameron, who is saying, refuse any promotions offered that engages public interest. We also have some more here. Donald Kipkorir is saying Kenya must accept help from FBI and Scotland Yard. We must know who killed Msando. Let every suspect be a person of interest. There you go. But then, of course, there's so many people talking about fake news and how one is able to detect the various sources of fake news. And there's quite an interesting infographic here that talks about the reality of fake news in Kenya. And they say politics is a hot topic in Kenya. In fact, 91% have seen news about the general election in the past 1 month, and 89% of those have seen news at least daily or multiple times a day. Now, a range of sources are being, referenced for general elections, and some of them are actually radio references, TV at 50%, and social media is being placed at 49%. That means a huge chunk of information is coming out as fake news on social media. Newspaper is being given about 37%, and friends and family are being given 34%, while community are being given 25%. So fake news about elections is widespread, and you can actually see the percentages right there. They're actually saying 90% suspect having seen false or inaccurate news about the election, that is the Kenya election. And we also have about 87% who suspect having seen deliberately false or inaccurate news about the election, and only 6 in 10 feel able to access all of the information about the general election that they need. That means that a huge chunk of information is coming out as false news. Now, the impact on media consumption preferences, we are seeing 67% prefer comprehensive and detailed information, while 33% prefer summarized and concise news. And that's where the weakness is, because those who preferred summarized news and concise news are going to be possibly the biggest victims of false news, because false news comes with a big headline and the rest of the information is all hogwash, just like one of the respondents put it. But just about how much does false news or fake news affect us? We just sourced out some of the information from our viewers. Just take a look at what they have to say.
As a content producer, I don't think that I have generated any fake news out there. But then, in this era of social media, we need to be very careful about information that we send out there, especially on our social media sites, because that information affects people. It's about people's lives. So when you tweet something about someone's life and it affects them negatively, then that falls on you. In this era, we also need to understand that social media has made everyone a journalist, and everyone right now is an informer out there. So that means when someone finds information, they don't really necessarily verify it. They just go out and tweet it. Or
fake news and its effect on mainstream media. Let's start with an incident where Joy Doreen Bira was arrested, and a guy took to social media to spread propaganda that she had been executed. So when I tried to clarify that she had been arrested, not executed, you should have seen the war that erupted on Facebook, with the guy calling mainstream media, all sorts of things, how irrelevant we had become, because I am in mainstream. But irrelevant because people no longer wait for 9 p.m. news, people no longer wait for the 7 p.m. bulletin, as long as there is a breaking story on Facebook, and people won't take the time to research or find out the credibility of this particular story. So fake news has definitely affected mainstream because mainstream no longer breaks the story. It doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't. And regardless of the truth, if fake news has a catchy, fake, eye-catching headline, then mainstream doesn't play along.
If fake news has a catchy headline, then mainstream media actually, loses out. That's what she tends to say. So in the wake of fake news, just how credible is mainstream media? I guess that's the challenge we all have to face right now. And in that documentary by John Allen Namu as well, he was able to put out some of that information. But Ben, I'm sure this question would be very relevant to your panelists this evening, especially after today's news about the KDF official who was reportedly missing and later on was found, or at least showed face. And we had the press release as well, or media briefing about the same. I don't know what your panelists would think about the rise of fake news in this day and age as we near election days.
All right, thank you, Joy Doreen. Very good question there, even as we continue the IBC discussion. Very interesting. She asked a question about this age of fake news and all this. A lot happening, especially online. A lot of Kenyans online as well.
Now, fake news arises from the fact that social media took over from mainstream media. The quickest, fastest way of accessing information has been social media. It's an open platform. Now, look at this. We in the academia, when we teach, we normally insist on our students don't use Wikipedia as a source of academic. Why do we say that anyone can post there? So that again can be a lesson the mainstream media can take. Don't just pick the way it is. Do the background check. I know there is that temptation. At this point, any news that seems sensational sells quickly, and you have this strong online presence. So it's a question of how can mainstream media hold just a bit, investigate, do the collapse, have a background check, then flash it out as a breaking news. Right. Because you have a temptation. And that was the same kind of an issue that affected the Western elections, both in the UK, in the US, whereby the voters could even be swayed by the fake news. By the time the news is verified, the damage is already done. So there's that temptation, and it is because of the timing. Right. We are at a period where perception and sensationalism sells beyond even
Martin,
truth.
I know you're old school. Yeah. Where is the place of fake news?
I was listening to Joshua and I was getting amused because according to Trump, the problem of fake news is not in the social media, it's in the mainstream media. So he thinks that the likes of CNN and others are, I mean, the point about fake news is actually a deliberate distortion or a deliberate misleading post. And we've seen quite a lot of those. You see, what do I call fake news? A murder is reported, and you wake up and you already have a well-documented sequence and opinion about it. Now, you could be right, but chances are that you have relied on wrong assumption or wrong basis to arrive to where you are. So what I think we are in as a country, and I think Joy Doreen Biria raises this, and this is a very important point. We have decided to touch the self-destruct button in this country. We've decided that anything passes. I mean, if I say anything about Ben Kitili now, the next thing somebody's going to do is to spread it, and the next thing, it will be the big thing in the media. Now, we have to be very careful, because what we are doing is that we are destroying ourselves, we are destroying our reputation, we are destroying our credibility, we are eroding our trust in each other, and just destroying our fabric. Right. So really, it's something that we should be serious about.
Joy, what do you think?
Let me weigh in on it. You remember this, was it on Tuesday, or when was it, about yesterday or the day before yesterday? The CNN was forced to actually issue a statement to say that there was a certain clip that was circulating in Kenyan social media that seemed to give some fake opinion poll that they were supposed to have held. And the same with the BBC. Right. They felt that they actually had to come out and clarify that these clips doing the rounds were not originated from these media houses. What does that tell you? It tells you two things. One is that people are not just spreading fake news, they're actually generating fake news. Now, when fake news is being generated, as Martin said, it's generated to actually give some information or misinformation.
Right.
And so you have to find out who stands to gain from this. We need to follow the paper trail. Let's follow the money. Who is paying to generate this social news? And then the other thing with Kenyans is, like, we have this thing where we have to be the first to know. You have to be the first one, get it for one. This thing of forwarding as received, as a sort of disclaimer. I'm not responsible for this, but I got this and I'm passing it along. We have to get to a place. We had a name for it when we were growing up. It was called Udaku. Umbea, if you like. And we've gotten to a place where Umbea is no longer shameful. We are happy to peddle.
It's official.
Yeah, we're happy to peddle whole lies and half truths.
All right, let's move away from the IEBC issue for a bit now and focus on some of the latest actually, this week's opinion polls on the presidential race here in the country. Of course, that is by two of the leading research firms in the country. The latest opinion polls by two of Kenya's leading research firms are out. According to Ipsos, President Uhuru Kenyatta would beat NASA's Raila Odinga if elections were held today. That poll by Ipsos was conducted between July 22nd and July 30th, showing that Kenyatta would win with 47% rating among likely voters ahead of Odinga, who scored 44% in that poll. In another poll conducted by research firm Infotrak between July 27th and July 31st, this past week, the opposition coalition presidential candidate Raila Odinga is leading the popularity with 49% rating, 1 point ahead of President Kenyatta, who has 48%. So those are the latest ratings, gentlemen and lady, given by two of the leading firms in Kenya, but showing two different scenarios. Let me start with you, Joy. What is your reaction to the fact that, to the difference, first of all?
You know, the misfortune with with these polls is that the way we have looked at them in the past has been a sort of indicator of where we are going to go with the political scenario. And the politicians have been using them also to gauge their popularity. Right. Unfortunately, in Kenya, what has played out over the last 2-3 weeks, it seems like pollsters are actually becoming guns for hire. And when we get there now, you are not too sure whether the sampling is being done in a deliberate attempt to produce a certain result. Because if these two pollsters were playing this by the book, we should be having almost similar results. The fact that they're so diametric, it tells me, therefore, that neither of them can be relied on as being the gospel truth. Maybe if there was a third pollster who could be able to balance it out, you may be able to have a better indication. But moving on from that, we have to understand that polls are meant to help the politicians to know where to lay emphasis, and also meant to help the undecided voters to maybe see where they should hedge their bet. But the way polls are being run in Kenya these days, it's almost like sport pesa. Wake up unapata, wake up unapoteza. And I think we need to come to a place, even as professionals, let us be honest in our dealings. Right. Even if we have preferences, let it not be so obvious what we are trying to push. Let's go ahead and do our work professionally and let the people decide.
Martin, what stands out for you in these two polls today?
Actually, and like what Joy is saying, I don't see much difference between these polls. The only problem is that you decide to play around with your sampling, and then you decide, I don't necessarily disagree entirely. You also decide who is ahead and who is down, depending on how you want to play it out. Obviously, polls help make certain decisions. There are those who are undecided who will decide because they are seeing the trajectory of things. There are those who are waiting to see where the wind is going for them to join. So when you tell them that this is the side that is leading, then somehow they'll make their decision. So polls are supposed to help in swaying perceptions and so on. But that said, there's still a margin of error in these polls, plus and minus 2. So if you're saying that one is 48 and one is 49, you really are saying that there's a likelihood that we are 50 plus. So if your message is to say, look, none of these people are likely to be getting 50 plus 1 in round 1, maybe that message should actually be the opposite, that given the closeness between 49 and 48, really, this is a round 1 affair. So if I was advising any of these guys, I'll tell them, look, there's no second chance, just go flat out. This is the only option you have. So It's a good indicator.
All right.
It's unfortunate that in this country, sometimes, and as Joy says, you do not know how to tell the truth from the lies. Maybe even we've been talking about fake news, but
Right.
there's also a place for fake polls. And by the way, I've seen quite a number of fake polls, and sometimes very well photoshopped. So you see,
Very
you
well
can even
done.
associate it with a major pollster, and that is
Hillary
happening.
Clinton.
The thing that stands out for me, the undecided voters,
It's
according
shrinking.
to Ipsos, is 5%. According to Inftrack,
It's
it's 2.2%. I know. Is this where the ballot is, Joshua, according to you, or what does it say?
Now, what both polls tells me, one, that the election is a cliffhanger. Number two, I don't buy the idea of a runoff. From what you see, there'll be no runoff. Why? If you talk about the undecided, they will vote.
Of
At the end of the day, they'll vote. If the undecided were to vote for the third party aspirants, then we'll take that. So we have two aspects that I can deduce from the poll. That one, we have a very close poll. Secondly, if you factor in the margin of error, it shows that both coalitions have the ability of superseding and getting the 50+1. And it just brings into play exactly what happened in the US, where every subsequent polls gave Hillary the lead, but the margin of error and the gap with Donald Trump was so small. What turns out, when it comes to such opinion poll, I tend to believe in them in the sense of giving the general picture, but into the specificity, it goes to the turnout, the issue of turnout. Elections such as this are won by turnout. In 2013, Jubilee was able to turn out its voters. So this election is even more critical in the sense that it's a question of between the two, who will be able to turn out its vote.
All right.
I'm worried about the opposition guys because of one thing. One, they have cried foul for so long about the rigging of the election to the extent that I start to feel it may depress their vote. Secondly, the moving out of their supporters back into their homes from Nairobi. That again takes a hit. So you have a case whereby if they are to go with these opinion polls, one, the undecided will make their mind, so there will be no runoff. What will dictate the winner, basing on the margin of error, will be a simple case of turnout.
Voter
Who
turnout.
brings out his voters
Martin,
out?
away from the pollsters, according to you, where will this election be won or lost?
These elections, I mean, and Joshua is spot on. It is whether your supporters walk the talk. If your supporters are donning on your colors and they're shouting and they're giving you this impression and they're just picking your money the way you've seen there, chances are that on that day, because there will be no money being given, they may not turn out. And if they don't turn out, you are home. So whoever turns out the numbers has this thing in the first round. Obviously, it's been a fairly tense, a fairly divisive, and very stretching. I don't think that I've seen the president campaign as hard as he has campaigned. In 2013, he wasn't as visible. This time round, despite the busy schedules, he's actually on the field. He's been crisscrossing. I mean, they go this way today, the other guys go back that way. So really, they have been pounding. They have been stomping. And for that reason, all now they need to do is to reassure. I mean, the opposition, for example, is not reassuring its supporters that they are ready for the election. So I don't think that that's going to help their turnout. What everybody should be saying, look, guys, we have done our bit. We are ready for this thing. Just come out and now do it for us.
Joy, where do you think this will be won or lost?
You know, there's something that the professor of politics taught us those days when he was ruling the roost. The votes are in the mashinani. These rallies and these big things in Nairobi especially will give you an impression that a big crowd is with you. But meeting the people, talking to the people, making them understand what your message is, that is what gets people to stand with you. And this time around, I must give it to NASA. They've really stepped up their game in terms of messaging. And you can tell their supporters by how they talk. I mean, if you meet a guy and you start talking and you hear free, fair, and credible elections, you just know this one has been NASWAD. If you start hearing, when the people that talk about peaceful elections, they look at you like you're jubilated. We've gotten to a place where the messaging has been very effective. It has been very consistent. The principles, not just from Jubilee, even from NASA, we have seen a level of engagement with Mwananchi that we have not seen before. Now, the thing that I agree with my brothers here is that the get out the vote now is the most critical part.
Right.
Because if you don't get your supporters to get out the vote, then you're not winning this. But moreover, we must remember that we've got this chunk of young people who've since registered from last time. this is their first time voting. Those are people who are still walking the ideological, political walk. They're yet uncontaminated by what the rest of us who've chapered a few elections cycles have been chapered with. And those are the guys I think also are major swing vote, because these are guys who don't know Tulipigania Uhuru. They don't know the second liberation. Right. They don't remember those things. So those are guys also we will see that particular demographic being a very serious weight. And if somebody can capture the imagination of these 18 to 20-year-olds, they might find that the weight might just swing in their favor.
All right. Let's talk about, I want us to talk about one final thing before we wind up the program this evening. And that is, of course, even as the IEBC prepares to conduct this election in the next 7 days or so, one of the IEBC commissioners, Paul Kurgat, has indicated, told KTN News that if none of the 8 gentlemen fighting to be the president of this country were to garner 50% plus one, then there might be no funds to, fund a presidential runoff. I want to get your opinion on this. I've seen almost all of you don't think there'll be a presidential runoff, but what does this mean? I mean, no funds for a runoff?
Now, when you say there'll be no funds, that does not mean that if a runoff comes to be, that will be stuck. Yes. Definitely, we can always do supplementary budget. I may agree with his concern that he's just sounding out that as at where we are, we don't have the funds set aside for such a runoff. That is okay. But that doesn't mean he can say conclusively there's no money for runoff. There will be money for that. Right. But again, as I said, the reason why we're saying we are skeptical about that, we are facing a decisive vote. You have a case where the voter has been squeezed into a corner where he has to choose between the two sides. There seem to be no new message from the other the other fringe aspirants. Right. So in this case, when you talk about budgeting, that's a fact. Then secondly, please go back to the changing over of the previous commission to this commission. There was that tussle about the budget. And again, now that is where we are. Because from the delayed process and the political handling and the bargaining that now went into this, we delayed, we never kept our timelines. Even when it came to budget, you remember they kept struggling and trying to argue before the budget allocation committee. But that doesn't mean the country will be unable. The country will definitely be in a position to.
All right, very quickly, this is your closing remarks. What does this mean?
I think this I must say very clearly to our viewers. The statement associated with the commissioner is a reckless statement. Our constitution is very clear. If there's no decisive winner in the first round, we will go to the second round. We will implement the constitution. All IEBC needs to do is to put its budget together and put its request for funding. It's not up to IEBC to say that there will be no money. As far as I know, IEBC is not the National Treasury. And once the National Treasury is petitioned for money, it will make money available. So let us not, again, we don't want fake news. We don't want sensationalization. So, and even IEBC commissioners shouldn't engage in drama. Just tell us what you'll do to help us, to give us a free and credible and fair election. That's what your business is. And you tell us that if it's round 1, we are committed to a free, fair, and credible. If it's round 2, we are committed to a free, fair, and credible. That's the message IEBC should be giving us, not about money.
All right. Joy, you have the last word for us.
You know, the IEBC is like this girl you've taken for a date, and then you tell her, order what you want, and then she tells you, you know what? Because the chicken is expensive, let me just eat the sausage, and we'll be good to go. I mean, it's not the IEBC that pays for these elections, the Kenyan people. The Kenyan people gave themselves a constitution that said, if we don't get an outright winner, we are willing to pay more to get who we want as our leader. Just recently, when the court case came out and they were told that they might have to go for somebody else to print the papers, they had gotten approval from Treasury to actually find another printer if the court decided against Al Ghurair proceeding. Now, they didn't say they didn't have money then. It's not the money, it's our money that we're spending. Granted, we are running one of the most expensive elections in the world. In fact, in Africa, I think we are the most expensive elections. We're almost hitting the $1 billion mark. Right. So we have to get to a place where we have to ask ourselves, do we have the money to be spending on elections like this? But be that as it may, I agree with Martin, that statement was out of whack. It was inappropriate. And moving forward, I would that the commission would pick a particular spokesman so that the messaging is consistent and is a direct stream rather than picking snippets from the different commissioners, because that way you have misinformation.
All right.
If
Thank
I'm
you.
just to finish on that, if IBC can
20
pick up
seconds,
its communication strategy,
Right.
I don't know why it is so difficult. 24 hours, Martin says, then be consistent for the next 8 days.
Yeah.
Keep the conversation
Morning,
going.
noon, and night.
Yeah.
Kama dawa.
All right. Many thanks, gentlemen and lady. Joy Brendam Divo, advocate, political analyst, Martin Olo, and Joshua Kipto. I wish we had more time, but thank you for coming to the show tonight and giving us your perspectives. And so we leave it on this edition of Kivumbi 2017. Our wall-to-wall coverage continues here, of course, every day. Many thanks for joining. I'm Ben Kitili. Good night from Nairobi, but I hand you over to Joy Doreen Bira with the last word on the online conversations. Joy Doreen.
All right, Ben, and let me wind it up here with some feedback. Ezekiel Obilo is saying, I trust the IEBC will do a good job. Let the death of Chris motivate their will and passion to offer credible elections. That's some views coming in there. But still looking at the conversation we were having earlier today, some people, you may think they studied bachelor's degree in propaganda dissemination in the university. All of this propaganda going on online is deafening. And we also have one coming in from Lawrence Seko, who is saying source plus timing plus verification and validation of evidence plus historic trends and similarities and objectivity is what we actually are looking for. And we also have Mutuku Fred, who is saying WhatsApp, Facebook have challenges in verifying fake news from factual news. That is under the hashtag Kivumbi 2017. And Omondi Wycliffe is saying looking at the URL can help one identify and differentiate between fake news and facts. Fake URLs tend to copy the authentic sites. There you go. And finally, we'll have one here from member Ibrahim, who is saying fake news always has grammatical errors in plenty because it's written in a hurry, all for the likes and the retweets and the comments. Well, thank you all so much for taking part in this conversation today. Tomorrow is another day, and we'll have yet another conversation as we head close to Election Day that is going to be on the 8th of August, 2017. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. Have a good night and God bless.